It's been a busy Tuesday in the NFL as news is starting to pour in. Teams starting to adjust their rosters and their salary cap situations heading into free agency next week. Welcome into Verts. My name is Harrison Graham. We got about 4 or 5 stories that we're going to run through and react to here on today's episode. Let's start with this. The Jets have officially released wide receiver Davante Adams. They will save about $30 million in cap space. They kind of put out like a fake leak that they're open for business in a trade, but any team trading for him would have had to take like a $35 million cap hit. That was simply never going to happen. And let's face it, when you factor in the cap part of it and they already moved on from Aaron Rodgers or announced that they're moving on from him, this was a given. There was no scenario where Davante Adams was playing with the Jets in 2025 and beyond, especially once they announced that they were moving on from Aaron Rodgers. He's still good. I mean, Davante Adams is going to have a good market, I think. I mean, he still put together a 1,000-yard season, and that's having a few games with the Raiders where he wasn't putting up much numbers due to bad quarterback play. He picked it up once he got with Aaron Rodgers. He's still, to me, top 15 type of receiver. I mean, he's not at the peak of his powers anymore, but I think he's kind of a mid-low tier wide receiver 1 and certainly a hell of a wide receiver 2, depending on a team that he goes to. Like I said, I think he's top 15 guy at his position still, top 20 at worst. So I do think he'll have a pretty strong market moving forward. Probably not more than a 2-year deal given his age. I think he'll be 32, 33 soon, but still a very good player. Now, as far as what's coming next, it's pretty well known that he's going to do one of 2 things. 1, he will follow Aaron Rodgers to wherever he signs, or 2, he will go back to the West Coast. Now, he's not going to go back to the Raiders unless there's some twisted world where they sign Rodgers and he's willing to go back there, but I think that ship has probably sailed. However, I do think there are 3 teams on the West Coast that make a lot of sense. The San Francisco 49ers, they already traded Deebo Samuel. There's some chatter they could trade Brandon Ayuk, although I doubt it, but he is coming off a major injury. Unclear when he'll be healthy, so I think they could make some sense as they're trying to bounce back after a bad season. The LA Rams, we know they're moving on from Cooper Kupp. You get Davante Adams to pair with Puka Nacua and Sean McVay's offense with Stafford. That's pretty appealing, I would think. And then the Chargers as well. He would be a true wide receiver 1 there as they need one badly. They've got, obviously, Lad McConkey roaming the slot. Quentin Johnston did some good things last year. I think as a 3, that would be a pretty good role for him with Adams as the 1 on the other side. Justin Herbert needs a top target. I think any of those 3 will make sense and they'll all be interested. And then obviously, like I said, whoever signs Rodgers could be a fit. The Giants, to pair him with Malik Neighbors if they sign Rodgers. If the Steelers get in the mix for Rodgers, they could use another receiver outside of George Pickens. So we'll see where Rodgers ends up. But West Coast, following Rodgers, that's where Davante is going to be in all likelihood. What say you? Where do you think Davante Adams is playing next year? Predict the team down below for Davante Adams. I think he'll probably wait and see what Rodgers does, and then he'll make a decision as teams start to court him in free agency. Okay, we had a trade go down about an hour and a half ago. The Bears beef up their offensive line. They go out and get Jonah Jackson, sending a 2025 6th-round pick to the LA Rams. And this is one of those trades that I think is a win-win for both parties as it didn't work out in LA, and the Bears had to add some pieces to their offensive line. They still need pieces, by the way. But from the Bears side of things, they fill one of their starting guard roles. He will play left guard as he reunites with Ben Johnson in Chicago. Once Trey Smith came off the market, you kind of figure that they might poke around on Jonah Jackson in a potential trade, given that the Rams are allowing him to seek a trade. So the Bears fill a starting spot for a guy that Ben Johnson is familiar with. He had a lot of success in Detroit under Johnson in that offense. And then for the Rams standpoint, look, it was one of those classic big free agent signings that just didn't work out. I don't know if it was a scheme thing. He was a little banged up last year. It could have been a multitude of things, but did not fit in for whatever reason. So they dump his salary to the Rams or to the Bears. Now there is a contract update from since this news first dropped. His cap hit this year and next year is just over $11 million. Initially, it was going to be 9 this year, 17 next year, but it's now 11 and change for this year and next year. And if the Bears, if it doesn't work out this year for whatever reason, they could cut him next year and save $9 million. So, but if it does work out, less than $12 million next year as well. So, kind of becomes a more reasonable 2-year contract for Chicago, especially if he does hit. Okay, it is breaking news season in the NFL. Free agency is just around the corner. Trades are going to continue to flow in. And this is the time to subscribe to 4 Verts because we're going to react to every major storyline out there. There's a lot of Shedeur Sanders buzz out there that I want to hit on a future episode. We'll probably do that sometime this week, so stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you turn that notification bell on and select all. That way you know exactly when we publish content and you never miss out on the latest NFL news and rumors. Okay, speaking of news, franchise tag deadline today, 4 o'clock Eastern. Not expected to see a franchise tag for Sam Darnold. This came in last night for me and Rapoport and others that the Vikings are not expected to franchise tag Darnold per him and Tom Pelissero. He did add this, which is interesting. All parties are working through options to potentially keep him in Minnesota. Darnold, who's set to hit free agency, has a situation best described as fluid. I think the Vikings, this is my take on it, I think the Vikings are trying to put positive PR for Darnold because they appreciate what he did last year. He certainly outplayed his contract, and that's why you're seeing it's fluid. They could still re-sign him. I expect him to sign elsewhere. I just don't. They drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round, and Darnold, as good as he was last year, and he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, if you just put a blank stat card in front of someone and said, what would you give this player on an extension? You'd say like $45 million, but this is one of the more unique situations in the history of the NFL because in the first 6 years of his career, he did nothing. He was horrible with the Jets. They tried to resurrect him in Carolina. He was pretty bad there, although he played okay down the stretch there. Then he goes to San Francisco, serves as a backup, kind of tries to rebuild his image a little bit, signs with the Vikings, plays out of his mind until the last 2 games when he completely shit the bed, for a lack of a better term. So this is a unique situation. I think the Vikings are looking at this and saying, look, when the lights turned on the brightest, he kind of fell short, and I would say massively fell short, and we invested a first-round pick into this other guy. We're going to let him hit the open market. If he wants to come back at a lower number, great, but we're not going to be the team that kind of sets the market for Sam Darnold. So I expect him to sign elsewhere. I think one of these 4 teams is where he ends up. I think the Raiders would be my prediction right now. I don't know, 3 years between 75 and 100 million. Maybe he gets the Baker deal. Maybe it's a little less. The Baker deal was 3 for 100 for what it's worth. The Giants, they could pivot there, although there's a lot of buzz with Aaron Rodgers right now with them. Could the Steelers go after him? We'll have to wait and see. Tennessee, if they do want to trade down from number 1, they could opt to sign Darnold instead and, use that first-round pick to get more capital and load up the team around him. So that could certainly make some sense depending on how they view the Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders situation. But, that's where things sit with Darnold right now. Unless something changes last minute, filming here less than 2 hours until the franchise tag deadline, I do not expect him to get tagged. Where do you think he's going to play in 2025? My prediction is the Raiders. I think they're in the position to throw him the most money on a multi-year deal, and I think that's going to be something that makes some sense. They'll get a running back, maybe draft Ashton Genty, be a run-first team, have Darnold be a play-action quarterback off of that, which is probably his biggest strength. Okay, a couple news items. The Cowboys have extended defensive tackle Osa Odighizuwa, 4 years, $80 million, which kind of came in right in on the PFF projections there. $58 million guaranteed. He gets a nice payday. I did not realize, I should say, he was 3rd in the NFL in pressures among interior defensive linemen. 60 last year. So he only had 4.5 sacks, but he caused a lot of havoc, dented that pocket for a lot of opposing quarterbacks. So the Cowboys keep a homegrown trenches player in Dallas. We'll see what that means for potential moves. They also restructured CeeDee Lamb, clearing up about $20 million. They'll probably do the same with Dak Prescott. So maybe for once, Dallas is a little more aggressive in free agency next week. We'll have to wait and see. Their arch rival, Philadelphia, has extended Saquon Barkley 2 years, $41.2 million, despite having 2 years left on that 3-year contract he signed last offseason, making him the highest paid running back in NFL history on a per-year basis at over $20 million. Kind of just feels like Howie rewarding Saquon. Plus, it sends a good message to other players in the locker room that could become free agents in the future. Like, hey, you play at a big-time level, you're going to get rewarded here. So I'm not sure exactly what the cap implications of that will be, as it's now a 4-year deal. Does one of those new years morph into one of the current years remaining? We'll see. We know Howie Roseman's creative with the the salary cap and the financials and all that stuff. But yeah, Saquon gets a new deal, and everyone's happy in Philadelphia. Okay, that's going to do it for today's NFL News Roundup. I'm sure more news items will drop as the days go on here. Free agency less than a week away. Be sure to subscribe, turn on the notifications. We will keep you guys covered on all things NFL. My name is Harrison Graham. See you guys soon.